We are pleased today to have Ron Weens join our forum. Ron has built a career around helping leaders build high-performance cultures, with successful engagements such as British Telecom, the Bank of Canada, and the City of Liverpool. He's the author of the book Building Organizations That Leap Tall Buildings in a Single Bound, and he's an international keynote speaker. Ron, welcome to our forum.
Thanks for inviting me, John. I'm very much looking forward to your viewers' questions today. Exploring the impact of culture on organization performance has been a lifelong passion of mine. Culture is the 800-pound gorilla in the room that, to date, very few people have paid attention to. Today's conversation, though, is an indication that this is changing, and this is exciting. Shall we begin?
Yes. Well, our first question comes from Ashley Robbins. She asks, your book talks about employees achieving the joy of work. How realistic is this? And then Peter Wong adds to that question to says, is it expensive?
Okay, that question goes to the heart of one of the tragedies in the workplace. People, and by people I mean both management and workers, have come to believe that joy of work is some relatively unattainable nirvana, a place where only the privileged few reside. The truth is, joy of work can exist just about anywhere in any organization. It requires one thing. It requires leaders who know how to build self-esteem in others, leaders who know how to build teams in which its members have strong, positive working relationships, and it requires leaders who know how to give their people meaningful work, leaders who know how to help their people understand the difference that their work is making. Charles Handy was one of the founders of the business program in the London School of Economics, and he's a favorite author of mine. And one particular quote is a favorite quote of mine. It comes from him. And Charles said that it is the organization's responsibility to create cause. If you get people working for pay, you get self-serving, selfish behavior. You should have added to that. If you get people working for pay, you also get people that have a miserable work life.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Frank B.
John, I haven't answered the second part in terms of the cost on that. In that it's a tragedy that the joy of work is not more common in the workplace. Not only because tragedy, or rather joy of work, enriches the human condition, but joy of work is one of the key drivers of a high-performance culture. And without it, performance suffers. Is joy of work expensive? Only in the sense that leaders have to understand its impact and value it, and value putting time into building it. Joy of work doesn't come from pay. It doesn't come from a posh office setting. It comes from believing in yourself, believing in your colleagues, and believing in your work. It comes from being a part of a team that is making a difference in the world, and that leads to joy of work.
Thank you, Ron. Sorry I didn't give you a chance to finish your answer. Our next question comes from Frank B. Do you see real change taking place from this command and control style of leadership, or what we hear is just talk?
It is happening. It's happening slowly. It seems that change on a grand scale, on a societal scale, takes about 50 years or about 3 generations. And we're just about through the first generation of managers. So we have about another 2 generations of managers to go before it really moves down. What's forcing it to happen now is the rate of change. And this is based on the work of Nick Bondi out of McMaster University, that in 1935, the doubling rate of knowledge was 35 years. In 1975, the doubling rate of knowledge was 7 years. This decade, what they're saying is the doubling rate of knowledge will reach 11 hours. Take a day off and your world has quadrupled, the world that your competition has access to. There are 2 types of managers that are resisting command and control, or resisting letting go of command and control, and there's 2 styles. One manager slows things down until he or she can digest all the information and make, quote, the right decision. But at that point in time, they might as well go home because the competition made the decision a long time ago, and it's closing the barn door after the cows have got out. The second type of manager who resists command and control runs around working 7/24. They work like a madman or a madwoman and come back in 3 years, and they're a stain on the carpet. And because there's no longevity, they hurt their organization. Organizations that are delegating are starting to pull ahead. And a great example would be Google. Google is noted for its innovative environment and the high degree of delegation that exists. But key here, there's a key concept, is that movement away from command and control does not mean movement away from accountability. It's interesting that the same organizations that are noted for their delegation are looking to delegate in a way that still holds people responsible. It's freedom, but it's freedom within constraints. The CEO of Google has recently gone on record as saying Google's success depends on more wood behind fewer arrows. Translation: when you get an opportunity and you take responsibility, you have to deliver on it. It's still early days on this one, and it's a long ways to go, and it will be not in our lifetime that we completely crack this nut.
Okay. Our next question comes from Anil Patel. Some people say CEO should stand for Chief Engagement Officer. What do you see as the merits of the CEO engaging their entire workforce?
Oh, brilliant question. Somebody's done their homework. When I work with CEOs around the world, I share with them a couple of things. I tell them that they have the most educated workforce in the history of the human race. I tell them that their people want to do good. They want their working career to have made a difference. And this is not the exception, it's the norm. And I tell them that their people are working so hard as they're working to the point of burnout. The CEOs look at me with disbelief and they say, Ron, if this is the case, why does this year feel a whole lot like last year? Why does change and progress feel like molasses flowing uphill? And the answer is simple. You have great people, but they all have their own agenda for doing good. And the way to get around this and to get those agendas aligned is for a leader to climb down from his or her pedestal and to get to know his or her people and to allow people to get to know the CEO as a human being. When people believe in the CEO as a person, they start to bend their personal agenda to their leader's agenda. A leader has two sources of power. The traditional source, the authority that comes from his or her position, the ability to order things to happen. And the second source of power is because of people knowing the leader and respecting the leader as a fellow human being, the willingness to want to follow the leader and the leader's agenda. Of the two sources, the second source represents the potency of the leader and is the real source of power, and it's a real source that drives change. So, good question.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Sheila. Loyalty to the employer is no longer what it once was. How would you address this?
It is. The person who asked this is bang on. Loyalty is pretty much vanished from a lot of organizations. Loyalty is a two-way street. If the employer wants loyalty in those that are part of the organization, then the employer has to demonstrate loyalty to them. If you're hiring and firing staff in response to short-term economic conditions, then you're treating people as cogs in the machine. And you're saying to staff, you have responsibility for your own well-being because the organization, you can give your all to the organization, but the organization will not take care of you. So if you treat your staff like hired guns, then expect them to act like hired guns. When the grass is a little greener somewhere else, expect them to move. The way out of this is not all that complex. Show commitment to your staff. Do things up to the extent possible. Promote internally. This means working at developing people. Connect staff to cause. Connect staff to each other. When you're part of a team that's making a difference, you do not leave the team. Help staff feel good about themselves. you know that you're succeeding in terms of building a connection and building commitment and building loyalty when staff care more about the success of the whole than they care about their own individual success. Basically, at this point, what you've created is an organization of zealots, and zealots, by definition, are loyal.
Okay, our next question comes from Peter Wong. Through your career of turning around organizations, how often was it necessary to get rid of people?
Well, I think people are going to be surprised by this answer. I spent a lifetime turning around mega projects. Mega projects is anywhere from 10 to 100 to $500 million, involving 50, 100, or hundreds of people, and turning around organizations. And the answer is, how often do I have to get rid of people? Not very often. If I'm doing a turnaround on a team that's failing and there's 50 to 100 people on that team, I might have to replace one person. And this is typically a person who's simply in the wrong spot. The work that they're being asked to do is not who they are. What is also interesting is every time I have removed the person, the rest of the team, one by one, have come up to thank me. It's disrespectful to the team not to act when someone is grossly underperforming. But there's another part that's interesting here. So in essence, when I do a turnaround, I'm doing a turnaround with the same team that was failing. We go from worst in class to best in class without changing personnel. And I do it by tweaking the culture of the organization. And this shows the power of culture and its direct link to performance. Good question.
Okay, our next question comes from Sophia. You wrote, if I feel my leader is genuinely interested and considered my views, even if my ideas are not part of the end solution, I feel that I have contributed. What does this feeling of employee contribution do for an organization?
When you are listened to, you feel respect. When you feel respected, there's a desire to contribute. And when I contribute, I feel part of the thought process. And even though my own solution, my own suggestion may have fallen by the wayside, I've been part of the process of shaping the final solution. And therefore, I end up owning the final solution. When I get a feel of contribution, I get ownership, and once I get ownership, I'm willing to put my shoulder to the wheel of implementation. The feeling of contribution is at the core of what drives staff working for the good of the whole. And working for the good of the whole is a key indicator, a key characteristic of a high-performance culture.
Okay, our next question comes from Neil Johnston. When we look at emotional intelligence, relationship intelligence, and corporate intelligence, which of these three needs requires the most improvement in a typical organization?
Let's say it's a very close horse race, John, and I would argue all three are in need of attention. Now, what's interesting is that of the three, emotional intelligence, relationship intelligence, and corporate intelligence, managers tend to be most comfortable with the corporate intelligence, or CI, because it is the most tangible. Corporate intelligence is all about building common cause, helping people understand the collective difference that their work is making to their clients, making to their society, making to humanity. The issue here for managers, even though they tend to be more comfortable with it than the other two intelligences, is that they don't do enough of it. Building cause is like blowing up a balloon with a hole in it. A colleague of mine a number of years ago did a study. And in that study, of a communication was within an organization. He looked at small, large, public, private, and his findings were very interesting. What he found is that the half-life of a communication from management is 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, staff forget half of what they've been told. Building cause is about connecting people to the difference that they're making, and this requires communication. But it requires communication on an ongoing basis. Max Dupuis, author of Leadership Jazz and the Art of Leadership, said it best when he said, as a leader, if you're not sick and tired of communicating, you're probably not communicating enough. Emotional intelligence and relationship intelligence is really new territory for a lot of managers. Emotional intelligence is about building people's belief in themselves. Emotional intelligence is about actually understanding your emotions and being able to use them, understanding your strengths and your weaknesses. As human beings, we tend to be exceptionally good at understanding our weaknesses and not very good at all at understanding our strengths, and so we have this bent view of who we are. The role of a manager in building emotional intelligence is to connect people to their strengths, so people can build their beliefs in themselves. And so it's actually reaching inside people and changing the images that people carry around of themselves. And believe me, for managers, this is new ground, and this is where managers require a significant amount of coaching. Basically, building emotional intelligence requires connecting people with their successes. And I have what's called Ron's rule. When I go in and do a turnaround, and let's say it's a $10 million budget, I'll say 0.5% of the budget for a $10 million project, that would be $50,000, is reserved for celebration. And sometimes the client will say, Ron, I can't do that. I cannot take $50,000 and set it aside for celebration. I say, not a problem. I don't need any money for celebration then, but you'll have to double your turnaround budget to $20 million. Then I don't need to celebrate. That is the power of recognizing people's success. And you don't celebrate at the end of the turnaround. You celebrate all the way through the turnaround to build up people's belief in themselves, to get them walking tall, such that their belief is what takes them through brick walls and gets them walking over burning coals. Good question.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question, and
okay.
That comes from Ronald Wood. How much effort does a corporation require to see some meaningful cultural change?
The answer, once again, is going to be surprising. There are a lot of surprising things about culture. And actually, it's another tragedy about cultural change, in that it doesn't take much effort to get the benefit. Is when I'm doing a turnaround, I don't get the impact in months. I get the impact in weeks. As long as you plan your change and your change strategy is well thought out, the returns are almost immediate. But here's the rub. Close your eyes, turn your back, and the old culture will spring back in a blink. To really change culture, yes, you get the benefits immediately, but you have to stick to it for an extended period of time. It's gently tapping it on its shoulder, gently bringing it back when it's trying to return to the old way. These gentle taps have to go on for 3 years or 1,000 days. I say cultural change is 1,000 days. Part of the problem is an organization initiates a cultural change program, and after 6 months they see a new set of behaviors and they say, whoopee! They declare victory, they take their eye off the ball, they go on to the next battle, and lo and behold, the old culture springs back. And this brings us to a particular requirement for organizations. If you're going to change your culture, and this goes for a lot of change, managers really need to be in their position for 4 to 5 years, because you need about a year to think it up, and about 3 years to see it through, and another year for safety. And in today's world where managers are moving from position to position, that's having an impact on the organization's ability to change. So, good question, difficult answer.
Well, thank you, Ron, for some very enlightening comments that you've made today. We need to conclude our time today and wish you the best of luck, and certainly employers that are seeking to improve their organization, I know they can contact you at ronweens.com and get some further advice that way. Thank you, Ron.
My pleasure, John. Thanks for inviting me. Have a good day.
Goodbye.